My name is Chris Wharton, and I'm an associate professor in the nutrition program at Arizona State University. And I'm extremely excited to have Jean-Martin Fortier here to offer this incredible workshop on profitable small-scale farming. This is a collaboration that's been months in the making with a lot of organizations, and I want to just call some of them out now. So Kelly Young, for example, at U of A Cooperative Extension, helped put this on, along with Steadfast Farms and Eric Schultz. And a number of other folks are contributing to this event. So I just want to make mention of one of the other organizations involved in this workshop. It's called the Food Systems Transformation Initiative. And so this is a new organization at ASU. It's one that I direct. And it's really focused on broadly equitable participation in the food system. And that means we really care about food security and people's ability to have access to healthy, oftentimes locally produced, culturally appropriate, affordable food. But it's also about ensuring that people can have livelihoods in the food system. And so this event is really an important piece of that. We really care about having an integrated and diverse food system and allowing people to have the opportunity to be producers and participate in the food system from that perspective as well.
Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. We have a very short growing season up in Quebec. We need to generate all of our income in that time. We want to have the winters off, because we used to have a life, and we would drive down to Mexico and surf and hang out. Now I do presentations. Okay? But that was the goal. And so what happens is that the summer, it's so intense with 2 farmers market, 1 CSA delivery, all the crops that need to be transplanted, direct seeded, the successions, all of that. There's so many parameters going on that we quickly realized that we needed to take some of the field heat from the summer and place it back in the winter where we had too much time. So a lot of it has to do with how we do our crop planning. Okay? And for us, crop planning is a 4-step process that we do every year after Christmas. The first thing that we'll do together is we'll do the financial objectives of the year. So we want to know how much income we want to generate, and then we work from there. The second thing that we'll do, once we know what our financial objectives are, we want to determine the production. This is what we need to get that. Once this is established, we'll make a crop calendar that's going to tell us what to do when, and the last step is to make a map to make sure that everything we want to do will have a place and that everything is placed at the right spot for different variables. Okay? So this is a 4-step process, and my goal for you guys today is to simply explain how these steps are relevant for you to understand how we go about it. Okay? So the first thing is setting up, whoops, there's 1 slide missing. That's funny. Okay, well there's 1 slide missing. I'm bummed. Okay, I'll try to explain it. When we're setting the financial objectives, when we do CSA, the great part about CSA is that we can understand production in terms of CSA boxes. Okay? And then you can say, I want to have 200 boxes delivered every week for 25 weeks. That is my program. And so from there, you can say, okay, 200, each box is going to be worth $25 of value. And I'm doing this for 25 weeks, which ends up being, I don't know, 120 grand. So these are your sales target for the year. And then you can have your margins, and then you'll have a pretty good understanding of how much money you'll be generating net. And from there on, you'll know in advance, at the end of the year, am I okay? Do I need to have a second job in the winter? Can we buy this expensive, oceanfront home that we've always wanted? whatever, but at least you know what is going to happen, okay? And you can play with these variables. Perhaps I'll do 250, perhaps I can't do 200, CSA it's too much for me, whatever, but the important thing is that you try to have a financial target that you want to reach. And once you have that, it's really important because these are your parameters. 200 boxes, 25 weeks, $25 value. Okay, remember that. And then you could ask yourself, am I growing everything? Or am I doing 35 crops, especially if you're starting out? Or am I focusing on certain ones that are more lucrative? On our farm, we were always having this debate. My wife would say, I want to do more cauliflowers. And I would want to do more lettuce heads. And then we would have these arguments, and it was like, well, why would we do more cauliflowers? Because they're nice, because people like them. I was like, do people really like them? Yeah, people really like them, okay. And then I wanted to know, okay, but if we're doing cauliflowers, are we making more money than if we're doing lettuce heads? And for us, in our constraint of space, we wanted to measure this with two factors, which is the revenue per bed. One bed of radishes, one bed of cauliflower compared to one bed of lettuce heads, which one grosses the most? Both of them do $500. Optimal yields at our price point, we get the same amount of money. But the other variable is that we want to know the number of days that the crop will occupy the space in the garden. Lettuce, 45 days, cauliflowers, 80 days. So that means that I can almost do 2 times the lettuce in the same amount of time I can do cauliflowers. So we've measured this for all of our crops, and we've came up with this chart that we've shared with you guys in the book. So this is very useful if you want to kind of know which one might be better off. That doesn't mean that you won't do some of them, but giving the choice, if you have a hot market for both, might as well perhaps focus on the lettuces. Okay? So we've done this, and then the next thing is that we will go and systematically fill in the boxes for 25 weeks. So we want to know what's going to be in each of these boxes. And generally, we follow somewhat of a recipe. So we want to have from 8 to 12 different vegetables per boxes. We want to have lettuce included in every share every week because people eat a lot of lettuce and because I won the argument and we're growing more lettuce than we're growing cauliflowers. Okay? We want to have greens every week. You know, when we started farming, nobody knew what kale was. We were pushing kale and chard. Now it seems that force-feeding people helps. They appreciate it now. And we like greens because they grow in the mild temperatures. They're cold hardy. So in the spring and in the fall, they work out well. We'll have 2 root vegetables. We'll alternate between carrots and beets, turnips, radishes, whatever. And we want to have fruits as soon as possible because they're the real money maker and because people want to have, you know, tomatoes in May. In our climate, tomato in May is like ridiculous, but that's what they want. Okay, so this is to say that when we determine what's going to be in our box, we follow this kind of guideline. It could be different where you are, but that's what we do. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do then. We'll have share number 1 is going to be delivered June 16th. And it's going to be composed of half a pound of spinach, a bunch of radish, 2 cucumbers, a pound of summer squash, kohlrabi, garlic scapes, kale, arugula, cilantro, and then the value will be $26. Fine, we're in January now. We're planning this. And then next week, the next box will have lettuce, turnips, beets, and then the value will be $26.50. And then the next week, this is what we'll have. And then we go on the line and we'll do the 25 weeks targeting all of these crops that we want to have in the boxes. Okay? For certain vegetables, like let's say summer squash, You plant it once, and then you have a weekly harvest for many weeks. So we know, because we've graphed it, that if you plant summer squash, one row, 100 foot, you'll have about 100 summer squash per week for 3 weeks. So we've done the math for all of these because we've measured them over time. And this is the graph that we use to calculate that, okay, so I'll have that amount every week. So we do this. Okay? You know, I warned you that this was the hard part of the day. It's true. Okay, so stick with me here. Okay? Once we've done this is important because the next step is to try and answer these two questions, which are the hard questions. The number of beds I need for each of these crops to have 200 units, 200 lettuce heads, 200 bunches, 200 whatever the unit we want to have, and what date they need to be planted or transplanted to have it at the right time. So these are the two questions we need to ask for all of the planned crop. And again, we use these charts. Days to maturity. What is days to maturity? Days to maturity is from the seed to the first harvest. Okay? If you are starting spinach and they're transplanted, days to maturity might be 40 days, but you also need to know how many days the spinach needs to stay in its cell. Let's say it's 20 days, because that's going to give you another date, which is the transplanting date. So for direct seeded crop, it's pretty easy. Radishes, if you want them in 30 days, you direct seed them 30 days before. If you want to have spinach at a specific date, let's say it's 50 days, you start them in the greenhouse 50 days prior, and then they're 20 days in their cell, subtract 20, which brings you in the calendar at another date, which is when it's going to be transplanted in the garden. You need to know these dates. So these charts are really handy for that. Okay? I'll just finish and then I'll answer your question. So coming back, I showed you these. These are the days that the crops need to stay in their cell. Once you have that, you can establish that radishes, if you want them on the 16th of June, they need to be direct seeded on the 15th of May. And you've looked at the yields, radishes, 300 bunches per 100-foot bed. So you need to have at least one bed of radishes to have your 200 units that week. Okay? We'll do the same with spinach. I want it by June 16. I need to start it in my greenhouse 40 days prior, and then 20 days later it's transplanted. And I looked at my yields, and I've calculated that I need 3 beds. Okay? We need to do this for all of the crops that we've determined would be in our box. Why is this important? Because at the end of the exercise, we'll have for all of our different crops, all the seeding dates. And then we can place a seed order for the whole year. So in the summer, we won't have to be thinking about, do I have enough seed of this, enough seed of that? It's all pre-planned. Okay? And that's when I decide which cultivars we'll be using. Radishes in May, Raxes are good for that, but the French breakfasts do better in the heat. So you can see and figure this out. But most importantly, the reason why we want to have these numbers, and that's the take-home message here, is because that's what we put in our calendar, these dates. So we have a big calendar like that, and we'll put all of the direct seeded, we'll put all these dates. So 15th of May, I need to be direct seeding 1 bed of racks. So on and so forth for all of our crops, which in the end gives me at a weekly glance everything that needs to be done in the garden. What needs to be direct seeded, what needs to be started indoor, what needs to be transplanted. And so I can plan a week ahead everything that needs to happen in the garden. And being sure that I won't forget anything because I've thought about it and it's all pre-planned. Once you're doing this, you can add a lot of other stuff also. Let's say I'm scheduled to be direct seeding 4 beds of carrots, 15th of August. I write it down, 4 beds of carrots, and then I know that if I want to do stale seed beds in pre-emergence with my flame weeder, I need to prepare the 4 beds 10 days prior. I'll write it in my calendar. Okay? I know that, 15 days after my broccolis have been transplanted, I need to add calcium to them. I'll write it in my calendar. So all of the management that involves all the different vegetables are all thought about in the winter, and then we put it in a calendar for us not to forget in the heat of the summer. And I can't tell you how valuable that is, because again, we're so busy, there's so many moving parts, that this is the only reminder for us to stay sane. Otherwise, we'd go crazy. The last step, and then I can answer your question and we can revisit some of this because there's issues with this, is that we need to make sure that everything that we plan has a room in the garden. And you remember this morning we were talking about how my rotation was sophisticated and it was super brilliant and all of that. But I also told you that there was a constraint. So I need to make sure that I haven't planned for more space than I have. So let's say I have 16 bed of liliaceae. I can do, I don't know, if I schedule 8 beds of leeks and 15 beds of onions, then I don't have enough room. I need to go back and make sure that I'm not over planning. And so this is the next step. So we have all of the 10 field blocks. And then we go and we plug in the crops. So beans, they were planted on May 23rd. We had 2 of them. And at that point in time, I need to know when is that bed going to be free again. So for all of my crops, I need to know how long I'm harvesting them until they're finished. And this is the part where I've described all of that in the last part of my book. Beans will take 50 days, and then we'll harvest them for 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, they're not productive anymore. They're not worthwhile. So we move on to another crop. So they're going to be 80 days. I need to know that number because I need to make sure that I have this date because that marks the end of that crop and it allows me to plant another one afterward. So I go on and I plug all of these with the end date, and then I come back and then I try to fit everything in. And it's at this time that I consider many different things that are really important. The direct seeded crop, my sprinklers, they sprinkler 4 beds. So I'll try and want to have these beds that are going to be direct seeded at the same time together. So I'm not watering like 3 beds here and 1 bed here, which would be a huge waste of time. If certain crop needs to be covered by an insect net, I'll try to put them together so that one net covers more beds. Crops that will be finished around the same time, I need to put together because that allows me to have another block at the end. So all of these things, they might sound not really important, but again, if you're in the heat of the summer and there's so many variables happening, and you haven't thought that covering 10 beds is the same amount of work than covering 2 beds, because the work is to shovel dirt on the edge rows, and both of them are 100 foot long, then you're wasting more time that way. So a lot of these things are thought about in the winter or in your summer. And that's how we get to have successions on the farm, even in a very short growing season. So here, you would have 3 or 4 crops per year per bed. And they would all be mapped out, and you would have occultations, 1 crop, solarization, another crop, and then you would go on and on like that, with all the dates, all things being clearly planned, even though it won't go according to the plan. Okay? Because it won't. But at least you have a plan. Because if you don't have a plan, then you're just kind of winging it. And for sure, you'll forget something. You'll miss out on certain things. You'll get overwhelmed by all of this. You'll forget to purchase seeds. You'll forget to seed something. And then the outcome of this is that you won't have what you need at farmer's market. You'll miss out on sales. And that's your fault. So you need to pre-plan it. So we do all of this. And then the last step is to all the mistakes that we've made. Okay? Let's say I had carrots here. And the carrots were finishing on August 20th. Or no, let's say I had beans here and I had carrots here. And I only gave myself 5 days between. So not enough time to stale the seed bed. So that's a mistake that I need the next year around to correct, making sure I'm not repeating these mistakes. And that is how we managed to have so much production on the small acreage and make it work. Woohoo! Questions? Did you guys understand what I tried to explain? The 4 steps? And starting with your financial objectives might sound like really logical, but in farming, people do it upside down. They have their cropping capacity, and then they try to make do with what's going to end up at the end. You're better to have a specific goal, a target, and then you plant and seed according to that. Most of the problems are not related to weather, it's related to us making bad calculations or haven't thought about that more. Usually the weather, even though it's always changing, radishes are 30 days. They're never going to be 45. So it's mostly us. And then what I've seen happen is, let's say, a very dark spring. So cloudy spring for months on, which offsetted everything. And then since everything was super late, and then it started to be really, there's a lot of light again, then the other crops, there was a jam. So I saw that happen once. But that was in France. So I was okay. But, you can't plan for the unexpected. So you plan how it should go, and then you adjust, you adapt. That's where being a grower is not so easy, because you're dealing with a lot of different variables. The other question that people ask me is that 200 boxes, okay, so what do you do with your farmer's market client? We count them as CSA members, because basically they're going to buy pretty much the same thing. Simplifies the production plan.